We have together trained over 10,000 professionals in development and humanitarian sector. This is our fourth webinar, targeting development organizations. We've had webinars, like Irene has mentioned, on monitoring and evaluation, water and sanitation, and grants management. Today, we have a session on project management. Next week, we have a session on proposal writing and fundraising. And we have had requests from our French-speaking NGOs. So on Thursday, we'll have a session on monitoring and evaluation in French for our partners from French-speaking countries. Later, depending on the need, we might have a session on Arabic and Spanish. We offer certificates, diploma, and postgraduate courses in over 200 humanitarian and development courses. We also offer in-house training as well as consultancies in development work, although this has been seriously hampered by COVID, as face-to-face meetings are not able to happen. And therefore, online training has a big demand. All our trainers have previously worked in development organizations, and therefore our training is pretty hands-on. We collaborate with international organizations and other institutes of higher learning in the delivery of our capacity building services. Let me quickly go into why project management is important in development work. And I know the trainer will be handling this, but quickly, what is project management? I would give my definition as project management involves planning, organizing, securing and managing of resources to achieve the successful completion of specific project goal and objectives and goal. Project management is any action that makes use of various strategies and techniques that aid in successful completion of a project. Again, I know our trainer will talk about this, but as a project management trainer, I would like us to pay attention to project design and planning, because most projects fail because of poor planning and design. Later, you realize you have challenges with the community, stakeholders, or government because of poor planning and engagement. So what does project management help us with? Project management training helps us with understanding ways to design and plan, implement, monitor, and evaluate projects successfully. Project management training helps educate learners on how to link logical framework and translate it into concise and transparent budget and simple work plan. Project management training helps us use the logical framework to design an effective monitoring and evaluation system for the project. Educate learners on how to develop work plans and budgets for the project. Helps in tracking and reporting results for individual projects or programs. Helps us understand best practices in project management. Project management contributes to monitoring and evaluation, especially through a work plan and reporting of project activities. What are the benefits of taking project management course? The future and the present development of organizations mainly depends on the ability to manage projects and programs effectively. Project management skills in this area are in big demand and continue to be in high demand because of the increasing development demands in different communities. By taking a project management as a career, you have higher chances of getting a job in an NGO or in other development or government organizations, or even in corporate organizations that run projects, including construction projects. You have higher chances for job promotion in an NGO or government if you specialize in project management, and more so if you focus on monitoring and evaluation. It has high demand as well. Project manager or officer has skills to make a difference in the organization as well as in a given community. Also, project management consultancies are highly paying. So anybody thinking of setting up a consultancy in project management, there's very big demand for services in that area. Having said that, I would now like to invite our trainer again, Mr. Stephen Mushami, to take us through the introduction to project management course. Thereafter, we will have questions and answers, and Ms. Edino Tieno from Capacity Africa will take you through the process of how our courses are delivered after the graduation. Thank you very much and welcome to this session.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you so much, Mr. Karegwa, for a very, very good foundational opening into this particular course. You have highlighted quite a number of things that makes project management become significant. And these are some of the reasons why there's a big drive towards project management because of the fact of how it is significant in the development and humanitarian sectors, and not just development and humanitarian sectors, but also in the private sector. It's something that is very, very useful. In fact, I think some of you may have heard of this term where right now we are trying to talk about the project economy. And in other words, what experts in project management are saying is that, implementing projects, running with projects successfully, basically just involves, is an economy on its own. And that's why it becomes crucially important. Today, if you have any government that is in power, then one of the things they will always be able to do is to set up a number of projects to make sure they can improve the livelihoods of people, be it infrastructural projects, be it health projects, be it social projects. They will always do this to make sure that livelihoods are able to improve. And again, as you know, in the humanitarian and development sector, we normally come to be able to bridge what governments are not able to do in different populations of vulnerability. And again, also in the humanitarian and development sector, then also we live to the true reality of the project economy. So, so you need to understand this as that important session that is always good to make sure that we are able to understand it as it is. So, so that's what I'll be trying to emphasize. And I would also want to apologize. I think if you hear my voice a little bit faint, I'm just recovering from just a small flu. So don't worry, I'm better now. And so I should be able to do as much as possible to make sure that you can hear me clearly. And I do believe that you're actually you're able to hear me very well. So let me just be able to begin and just see what we want to be able to cover for today, and just go through the agenda that we need to be able to look at. Okay, so so basically these are the agenda items that we want to be able to look at. We have 7 of them that are quite critical as we break down this subject to make sure it's easily understood by each and every one of us. So we will try to make sure, we know we have different levels of expertise among the participants, but we'll try as much as possible to ensure that everybody who is connected is able to follow our discussion. So we will be very, very comprehensive. We will try to simplify. And again, also not just ignore also the fact that we have to explain some technical concepts and ensure that everybody can actually be able to benefit from this particular session. So that's what we'll be looking at. And I'm wishing to welcome all of you. So my name is Stephen Mushami, as you've been told by Mr. Karegwa. I'm a project management consultant. I've been able to consult for Capacity Africa Institute. And this is something that I've been doing for quite a number of times, because we are able to support a lot of NGOs and a lot of other organizations that actually require project management skills. So when Mr. Karegwa says that we can also get into project management consultancy, I'm actually a living reality of that, because that's basically what I do on a day-to-day basis, just being able to support both humanitarian and development organizations, just be able to have some proper project management methodologies in their work, and also capacity building. So that's why I've been able to offer this for the last 20 years, and we're still keeping on just trying to ensure that we can support our clients as much as possible. Now, apologies as well. I'm not able to share my video because I have a problem with the lighting in my computer, but I'm sure you can see the photo in my slide. That's how I look like. So, so I'm not different from that, but that's how I look like if you just want to familiarize with me. So let's just start with being able to define a number of things. And the first thing that we want to be able to start with is we want to make sure that we can be able to well define what is a project, what is project management, the key concepts that are actually used in project management. Look also at the key phases of the project lifecycle. And also, as we look at the lifecycle, we'll also be able to pick project planning out of the lifecycle and just break down why project planning is important in projects. Doesn't mean that the other phases are not important, but you realize the success of your project is all dependent on how you are able to plan well for your project. So that's why we are able to pick project planning as something that is unique, and we need to be able to highlight that as much as possible. Now, the other thing is also the fact that we have some challenges in project management, and we need to be able to review what are some of those common challenges that we find in project management, because the challenges will be common as much as the projects might be different. You might be working on health projects, you might be working on social projects, you might be working on economic empowerment projects. But one of the crucial interlinking thing for all these projects is that the challenges faced in all these projects are similar. And that's why we would want to summarize what are some of those key challenges so that as we get into project management, then we will need to be able to understand how do we manage these challenges as much as possible. So ensuring that we can ensure that we are able to manage these projects as much as they are challenging as well. Again, also the other thing that we're going to highlight is the key constraints of project management and their management. So we will be able also to highlight that. And again, also we will look at what are the core competencies for a project manager, which is also what we want most of you to be able to have, because there's no way you're going to manage projects if you don't have the necessary competencies for a project manager. And I'm sure most of you are looking forward to be able to understand what are these competencies that we actually need to be able to have. So what I will do, I will make sure that I'm able to look at this maybe in the next 1.5 hours, so that, or less, so that we also get some sufficient time to be able to ask our questions, and I will be able to respond to them. So as we go through, just keep noting the questions that you may have, any comments that you may have, and then we will have a feedback session at the end of the presentation. So, so hold your horses. We will be able to ensure that we're able to give you that particular opportunity at the end of the session. So, so we'll be able to get into that. So that's why we will end with the participants feedback session, and let's all look forward to that as much as possible. Now, let's start with this crucial question, because every time, if we want to successfully manage our project successfully, then we always have to start at this point. We want to ask ourselves, what is a project? You know, that is one of the essential questions that we want to be able to ask ourselves. What is a project? And again, also, further going into it, still, we want also to understand what is project management. And I know some of you may be quite familiar with these definitions, but what I've done, I have picked the most standard definition that project management experts globally agree to as a way to define a project, be it in the private sector, be it in the humanitarian sector, be it in the development sector. The project management experts have actually been able to come up with a sound definition of what is a project. So there are many definitions that you will be able to get out there. But my purpose for this session was just to lead you on how are experts agreeing on how to be able to define a project. And that's the definition that I will be able to focus on, so that as I define that, then I will use that to make sure that you're able to see some of the essential characteristics of a project as well from that definition that I will be able to give. Then again, also, as I define project management, I expect that as you look at it, you will actually be able to understand what exactly do we mean when we say we are doing project management. If you don't understand the definition of project management, then again, now, how do you manage projects? So it's good to understand what is essential for you to be able to implement projects as expected. So, so this is something that we are actually able to achieve as much as possible. So, so what is a project and what is project management really becomes very, very essential to be able to define. So it's always good to ensure that we can actually be able to define that as much as possible. So, so it's always good to ensure that we are clear about exactly what is a project, and also we are clear exactly about what is project management. And those are things that we actually need to be very, very clear about as much as possible. So it's good to make sure that we can be able to clarify that as much as possible. So, so it's good to ensure that you are able to have that clarification as much as possible. So, so let's clarify that and exactly look at what do we mean when we say what is a project. So this is what we are able to define a project, the standard definition that we normally use globally to be able to define what a project is basically what we use as the standard definition for a project. And this is what we say: a project is normally a temporary endeavor that is actually undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. And so we understand that very well. And especially for most of us who are coming from development and humanitarian sector, we know when exactly we talk about results, because every project that we undertake should actually be able to lead us to achieving certain results for that particular project. Maybe in the private sector, they'll be doing a project maybe to come up with new products, new services. But for us in development and humanitarian project, we know our focus is on the results. And we will actually be clarifying what are results levels in projects. We'll be able to clarify that as well as we continue. So, so I just want you to take note of that. And then there are two statements that I've been able to highlight from that definition, as you can see. And as you can see, one of the ones that I'm highlighting is the issue of the temporary endeavor. Temporary endeavor is very, very critical to be able to highlight that a project is a temporary endeavor that is undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. And when you talk about temporary endeavor, you're simply talking that a project is short-term. So one of the things that you're able to realize is that the project will actually be a temporary endeavor that is actually undertaken to be able to create a unique product, a unique service. And it is important for us to be able to see that. Now, excuse me, what do we actually see when you talk about temporary endeavor? Now, when you talk about temporary endeavor, we're talking about projects are basically time-bound, and they actually focus on requirements to make sure that we can actually be able to deliver specific benefits for communities in cost-effective and measurable ways. So it's important to make sure that we understand the projects will actually be time-bound and will actually be able to focus on requirements to ensure that they can deliver specific benefits to communities in cost-effective and measurable ways. So a project has a start and has an end. And so whenever you find a project that does not have a start and an end, then that is not a project. That is what we refer as an operation. So projects, we know they are temporary endeavors. So they have a very clear beginning and a very clear end when the results are actually achieved. So it's always good to make sure we understand that. Then the other part that we were able to underline is that projects are able to create a unique product, service, or result. And simply, what we mean here is that, of course, projects will deliver outputs. And when you talk about outputs, we are talking about the deliverables that actually have to be delivered. And once these outputs are actually delivered, then they should actually be able to lead us to better outcomes for the project so that the beneficiary communities and other stakeholders can actually be able to benefit from this. So that's why we will be able to talk about the issue of having outputs that actually lead us to outcomes as expected. And we will be defining what exactly we mean when you talk about outputs, when you talk about outcomes, and when you talk about impacts as results levels for most of the projects that we actually work in. So that's two things that you can actually be able to emphasize from that particular definition. And it's important that you understand whenever you refer about a project, these are the two main characteristics that should always feature in any project that you want to actually implement. So it's always good to make sure that we can actually be able to have that understanding as expected. So it's good to make sure we have a unique product, also to make sure that we get a unique service and a unique result. And this is actually targeted to beneficiary communities of the project and also to the project stakeholders that are basically benefiting from the project. So this will actually be able to target these people in the different ways that allow them to ensure they can benefit from this. So it's good to make sure that we are able to understand that as much as possible. Now, the other thing is important also to highlight that there is what we call a project manager. And a project manager is very, very critical in project management. A project manager is quite critical in project management because the project manager is actually responsible for ensuring the overall success of the project. So it is important to make sure that we are able to ensure that the project manager is actually responsible to ensure that the overall success of the project actually comes into being. And later on, we will be looking at then what kind of competencies does this project manager need to have to successfully manage a project. If their role is this important in a project and it has to be recognized in a project, then what kind of competencies do these project managers need to be able to have? So we will be getting into that later on, but I think we have highlighted a few important things in just defining a project as expected. Now I want to stretch a little bit further, and now I just want to be able to look at what is project management, because we also need to make sure we understand what is exactly we are referring to when you talk about project management. It's also good to know what we are referring to. Again, there are many definitions that can be given about project management. Again, what I've done is I've picked the definition that most project management experts have actually been able to agree that this is the standard, the most standard definition of what project management is. So that's basically what I've picked. And simply, project management, therefore, means this is the application of knowledge, of skills, of tools and techniques to project activities so that we can be able to meet project requirements as much as possible. So, it's ensuring that we can apply the requisite knowledge, the requisite skills, the requisite tools, the requisite techniques, and we apply this to project activities so that the project activities can actually meet the requirements of the project, and the requirements of the projects are also the requirements of the project stakeholders. All the key stakeholders of a project, they expect certain requirements to be met, and that is why project management, therefore, is ensuring that we have the requisite knowledge, we have the requisite skills, we have the requisite tools and techniques that we can be able to apply to project activities as expected. And that is why we will continue urging you to register for our courses because one of the things is that we are able to take you through quite diverse knowledge on project management, also take quite diverse skills on and tools, and also techniques that we are able to utilize to make sure that we can meet project requirements as expected. So yeah, so it's good to make sure that we can have that understanding as expected. So it's always good to make sure that is well clarified. Now I want to go further and say another thing that we are able to emphasize for project management is the fact that project management, we always refer to it as proactive discipline and not a reactive discipline as such. So project management is simply a proactive rather than a reactive discipline as expected. So it's important to be able to emphasize that in project management, we don't respond to things after they have happened. But in project management, for us to be successful in managing projects, we have to take a proactive approach for us to have successful project management. So proactive approach is very, very critical than the reactive approach as much as possible. So it's good to make sure that we are able to get to that level as much as possible. Now, project management is simply accomplished through the appropriate application and integration of the knowledge, of the skills, of the tools and techniques for project management. So basically what we do for us to have successful project management, we ensure that we are appropriately applying and also integrating the knowledge, the skills, the tools and the techniques for project management. And this knowledge, skills and tools and techniques is what actually mandates you to want to go to a course in project management so that you are aware, what are these different knowledge areas I need to know about a project? What are some of these skills that I need to be able to know? What are some of the tools and techniques for project management that we actually need to be able to know? And that becomes very, very important. So project management therefore aims to ensure the effective use of resources and delivery of the project objectives on time with cost constraints as much as possible. Again, also, the other thing that we also are able to emphasize is that it is also the adept use of knowledge, skills, and you can see there under skills we are emphasizing both hard skills and soft skills, because soft skills are also very, very essential if you're going to be successful in project management. And soft skills, we are talking about how do you lead a project? How do you motivate a project team? How do you set an example to your project team? How do you ensure that you're able to motivate your project team? So a combination of all these soft skills really becomes important. And again, also the tools and techniques that are critical in the planning and the controlling of the project activities and resources from both inside and outside the organization so that we can be able to achieve the project results as expected. So it's important to make sure that we can actually be able to achieve that as much as possible. And so therefore, that's why we're saying the purpose of project management is simply to make sure that we can achieve successful project completion with the resources available. And so it is important to emphasize that the big significance of project management is to make sure that we can actually be able to achieve successful project completion with the resources that are available. So, so in other words, you're saying if you have resources and you don't apply successful project management, then you realize that those resources will not always be sufficient. But when you apply proper project management, then you will find that the project can actually come to completion with the resources that are actually available as expected. So, so that's something that we are able to emphasize and put in place as much as we can. So it's always good to make sure that the purpose of project management is to ensure we get to that successful project completion with the resources that are actually available as much as possible. Now, the other thing is that a successful project is one in which basically that project has actually been finished on time. So when you're asking yourself, what is a successful project? Then one of the things that we can say about that project is that that project was actually completed on time. And we know time is a big issue in projects. Most of the times we are not able to finish our activities on time. We are not able to accomplish our projects to be completed within the deadlines we've been given. And those are just elements of very unsuccessful project management. But when there is proper successful project management, then projects should actually be able to finish on time. So, so it's important to make sure that we are able to identify that. Then the other thing that also becomes important in that regard is also ensuring that the projects are also completed within the cost budget that we actually expect. So that's the other thing that we would expect most of our projects to actually be completed within the cost budget that they were actually expected to be completed in. And it is always good to make sure that we are able to realize that as much as possible. Again, the other thing is also ensuring that the project performs to the technical performance scope standards, which satisfies the end user or the beneficiary or the project stakeholders in whom we are doing the project for. So, so we also have to evaluate this project, did it accomplish the technical scope or the performance scope as outlined for this particular project. So that's another feature or characteristic of a successful project. And it's always good to keep these three things in your mind when you're thinking about whether my project is successful or is not successful. So it's very, very essential to keep that in mind as much as possible. Now, the other thing is that the effectiveness of project management is always critical in assuring the success of any substantial undertaking. So the effectiveness of project management is always very, very critical in assuring the success of any substantial undertaking as much as possible. And again, also, we know that there are certain projects that we actually need to make sure they are actually have a feasibility study is undertaken for some of those projects. And it is always important to be able to understand which kind of a project we need to do a feasibility study, especially the complex projects, the high value projects. Most of the times, most of these projects will always begin with a feasibility study that definitely includes a clear definition of the goals and the ultimate benefits that need to actually be established as expected. So, so it's always good to make sure that projects can be initiated with a feasibility study. Now, the other thing that we also want to be able to highlight is just take you around some key concepts in project management. I'll be taking you through that, just some key concepts. I know some of these concepts, you might be hearing them for the first time, but I just want to make sure that you are familiar with some of these concepts that we normally have for project management. So, so it's good to make sure that we are able to familiarize with some of these concepts as much as, and ensure that we can actually be able to have some of these concepts clarified as much as possible. And it is always good to make sure to make sure that we are able to understand some of these things as much as possible. So, so it's good to make sure that we can clarify most of these concepts as clear as we can. So, so it's good to clarify that as much as possible. Now, so let's start with the first concept, and I know some of us might be hearing this for the first time. Some of us maybe might be familiar, but there's normally a difference between project management and program management. So it is important that we understand that there's actually a difference between the two, because what happens in the sector is that people refer to a project as a program. So, so people don't see the difference between the two terms. They will always talk about a program as a project and talk about a project as a program. And this is a big misconception because experts have clearly tried to separate these two terms because in project management, we always have to ensure that we are able to organize our work very, very comprehensively. And that's why we need to have the different terminologies that actually express the different concepts that we want to be able to emphasize. So, so what is program management? First of all, let me start by saying a program is simply a group of related projects. So, so when you're referring to a program, you're basically referring to a cluster of projects that have some extent of relationship. And because of that, they are classified under a certain program. For instance, you know that if you're doing a health project in one of your organizations, you will have what you call the health program. And in that health program, you'll basically be able to have projects that are dealing with maternal health. You will also have projects that are dealing with infant health. You will also have projects that are dealing with public health. You know, you will have different projects that actually deal with different things, but all these basically fall under the same classification, which is a program. And that's why when you talk about a program, please understand there's a difference. We cannot equate a program with a project. There's actually a difference between the two. So it's important to make sure that we can actually be able to see that particular difference in a very clear way. So it's always good to make sure that we can differentiate that as much as possible. Then the next thing is that by grouping related projects into a program, then the organization can actually better coordinate the management of those projects. So, when you are trying to group related projects into a program, then an organization will actually better coordinate the management of those projects as much as possible. And so grouping these related projects into a program, then it allows us to be able to manage those projects very well. And that's what we call program management, looking at how to group projects into programs so that we can coordinate the management of those projects. And for some of us who basically understand diagrams much better. This is what exactly we mean. So we say that when you have a particular program there, then what we're saying is that you will have some projects that are classified under that particular program. And that's exactly what we mean when we are referring to program management as expected. Now, the other thing is to look at the next concept, which I know this one might be a little bit new to most of us when we talk about portfolio management. I know some of us might be a little bit new to it, but it's good to know that we also have another higher level coordination of projects, which we call portfolio management. And this is what we mean. A portfolio is simply a group of related programs that are actually prioritized by the organization and implemented so that we can be able to achieve the strategic goal of the organization. So you can see portfolio is actually determines based on the strategic objectives of the organization. So a certain organization is able to look at what are our strategic objectives for this particular year. Then based on that, they're able to identify portfolios that different programs will actually be able to fall into, and also how different projects will actually fall into programs. So basically, this is what we normally refer to. So we also refer to it as the highest hierarchy of coordination in project management, because once you get to portfolio management, there's no other hierarchy that you can get into. So the highest hierarchy for project coordination is normally portfolio, is actually portfolio management as expected. So this is the highest hierarchy for coordinating in project management as well. So it's good to make sure that we can actually be able to see that. Then again, for those of us who appreciate to see diagrams, this diagram can actually demonstrate what we exactly mean. So you can see we have a portfolio there, and in that portfolio, we have some programs there. And then in one of the programs, we will have some projects, and this brings in the entire hierarchy for coordination of projects in project management. So it's always good to make sure that we have this proper understanding for project coordination as expected. So it's important to make sure that we will be able to understand that coordination as expected. So it's the highest hierarchy of coordination in project management, and it is important for us to make sure that we can be able to understand that as much as possible. Now, the other thing is now to define who is a project stakeholder. So for most of you who will come into project management, you'll always realize people talk about stakeholders, and I think it's good to clarify. It's good to clarify what exactly we mean with a project stakeholder. So it's always good to make sure that we can understand what exactly are we referring to when you talk about a project stakeholder. So what exactly are we able to refer to when we are able to mention a project stakeholder? So that diagram tries to show us different types of stakeholders that we can have in a project. But let's first of all begin by defining what is a project stakeholder. So when you talk about a project stakeholder, we're simply referring to a person, a group, an organization who can affect, or who can basically be affected by, or perceive itself to be affected by a particular decision, ensure that they are also able to be affected by a certain activity or outcome of a project. And that is the person, the group, or the organization that we are going to reference as a project stakeholder. So anybody who can be affected or can be affected, or can perceive themselves to be affected by the decision or by the activity or the outcome of a project, then that is what we rightly classify as a stakeholder. So basically, that's what we try to emphasize. Again, one of the things that we emphasize is that Successful project management also takes place when we are able to manage our stakeholders. So anytime you want to be able to have successful successful project management, then you need to also ensure that you're very good in terms of managing your stakeholders as expected. And some of the examples that we will definitely be able to list as stakeholders, then here we are talking about our project beneficiaries, our suppliers, our project team members, our project donor, sponsor, our other organizational partners that we partner with to be able to deliver our deliverables. So all these guys will actually be able to fall under what we refer to as a project stakeholder. And you can see we have been able to further expand that list in the diagram, trying to look at the different people that can actually be considered as stakeholders. Now, the other thing is important to emphasize that stakeholders normally will have an impact or they will have an effect in the project in positive or negative ways as much as possible. So stakeholders will actually be able to have an impact and an effect in the project in both positive and negative ways as much as possible. So, so it's good to make sure that we are able to ensure that we can have a good impact and effect in the project in positive and negative ways as much as possible. So, so it's always good to make sure that we are able to understand that as much as possible. Now, the other thing is, again, also, stakeholders will normally have power and interest on the project outcomes and results. So stakeholders will always have power and interest on the project outcome and results. And it is actually the job of the project manager to make sure that they are able to, it's the job of the project manager to make sure that they're able to sustain that power and interest in the project outcomes. And so therefore, we need to do a number of things to make sure that we can be able to sustain their interest and also manage their power in the project. There are a number of things that would be important for us to be able to accomplish as well. So, so let's look at what are some of the things that the project manager should be able to do. Now, one of the things that we see, it is therefore very, very essential. It is very, very essential to identify all the stakeholders. And let me say this, most project managers or most project personnel are very poor on this. So at the beginning of the project, you don't take your time to identify all the stakeholders that you actually need to be able to have in your project. You don't take time to identify all those stakeholders. And what happens is that as the project goes on, then you realize there are certain key stakeholders that you should have included that actually you didn't include. And that probably leads to the project not being successful. So we really, really emphasize this particular emphasis in that it is always important at the beginning of the project. Please identify all the stakeholders that actually will be necessary in this particular project. And then the very easy way to determine who are those stakeholders, then what we do is we are able to evaluate, who will actually get affected or who will actually have an effect in the project. And those are the guys that we're able to identify and say, this will be the project stakeholders for this particular project. Doesn't mean that all those people, you actually prefer them to be in the project. So it's not about your preferences, it's about who can actually be affected or get affected by the project, and just determining their power and interest in the project so that you can be able to manage them appropriately. as much as possible. So I'm trying to emphasize that number one point, that it is always important that you identify all these stakeholders. So for some of us who manage projects, always ask yourself this question: have I been able to identify all stakeholders before I even move further into this project? So it's always good to make sure that we can determine that. Then another thing that also becomes important to be able to determine is also to establish what expectations do these stakeholders actually have for the project. I think it's also good to make sure that we can identify what are some of these expectations that they actually have in the project. And so it is important to make sure that we can establish their expectations as much as possible. And then again, it is also good to make sure that we are able to keep them engaged. So it's important also to ensure that these stakeholders actually we keep them engaged as much as possible, ensuring that we are able to keep them engaged as much as possible. So it's always good to make sure that we are able to determine what are some of these expectations as much as possible. So it's always good to make sure that we can actually be able to be able to establish their expectations as well. Then thirdly, is just to keep them engaged. So make sure you keep them engaged, and that will be one of the very successful ways of successfully managing your stakeholders. And finally, ensuring that you're able to keep stakeholder satisfaction as much as possible. So basically that's what we want to say about the stakeholder. Now, the other thing is the issue of project stakeholder management, what entails, because it is one thing to identify your stakeholders, but then again now, what is the other important thing in terms of managing those stakeholders so that the project can actually be delivered successfully? That's another fundamental question that we are able to identify as much as possible. So ensuring that we can understand what is project stakeholder management as expected. Now, project stakeholder management basically involves the processes that are actually required to ensure that we can identify the individuals, to ensure that we can identify the groups or the organizations that could actually impact or be impacted by the project. So it's always good to make sure that we are able to identify the individuals, the groups, the organizations that could actually be impacted or impacted by the project. So it's always good to make sure that we can do that. Then the other thing is ensuring that we are able to analyze what power, what interest, what expectations do they have in the project. That's another thing that we actually need to be able to establish. Do you know what is the power that your stakeholders have in affecting the project? What interest do they have in the project, and what expectations do they have? It is always good to establish that as much as possible. And so it's always good. And then the other thing is to make sure that we can develop appropriate management strategies for effectively engaging stakeholders as much as possible. So it's always good to make sure that we can do those three key things so that we can ensure that we are able to develop appropriate management strategies for effectively ensuring that we can engage stakeholders. And then there's a diagram here that basically summarizes how we manage stakeholders. So there's a stakeholder analysis grid that we normally use in terms of how we are going to manage stakeholders as expected. So let me see if I can be able to show you that. And I think, yeah, you can be able to see that. One of the things that you can see, there are two critical things that we evaluate from stakeholders. One is their power and their influence, and then the other one is their interest and their impact into the project. And so there are two things that we look in each of these two components, that's power and interest. We're able to check, does the stakeholder have high power in the project, or does the stakeholder have low power in the project? And then again, we are also able to look at, does the stakeholder have low interest in the project? And then does the stakeholder have high interest in the project? Now you can see, for those stakeholders that basically have high power and have high interest, as I'm showing you in the screen. This is high, and this is also high in terms of interest. Now, those stakeholders are very crucial, and it is important to actually be able to realize that, because you can see for those stakeholders, what we do is we manage them very closely. So we endeavor to manage these stakeholders in a very close manner as possible. And then again, we are also able, if the stakeholders basically have high power and also have low interest, then we need to make sure that we satisfy those stakeholders as much as possible. Then if they have high power and they have low interest, then we just need to make sure that, if they have low power and they have low interest, then they are the ones we classify here, and we just say for those stakeholders, we just need to monitor them. They are not as crucial as important. Then those ones who have high interest in the project, but definitely do not have any power in the project, then those ones will just classify them here, where we say, let's just keep them informed about what is exactly happening in the project. So, so normally that's what we are able to do. So it's a very important diagram to make sure that we can understand how to manage projects as managers that we actually need to relate with our team. And then also we have the specific strategic management skills and business management skills, so that we can relate what we are doing in the projects to what the organization wants to be able to achieve. And you remember, we looked at the hierarchies of project coordination. So you can see that a project down here is actually falling in a program up here. And a program up here is actually falling in a portfolio up here. And a portfolio up here is actually meeting the organizational strategic objectives. So it's always good, you can